right? Are you feeling that? Are you feeling it? Because we are marching with the ancestors on Saturday. We are marching. We are the descendants of extraction, the descendants of extraction of our land, the extraction of our neighbor. And so we are going to name what challenges we are faced as a people today. You're going to be hearing a lot of people out there talking about climate justice. You're going to meet a lot of people who are helicoptering into our community and trying to speak for our communities, right? So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be not only framing it, not only talking about it, but we're going to be developing relationships to show how we resist the appropriation of our land, the appropriation of our culture, our language, our rhythm, our identity, our food, everything that is us, that is appropriated and then sold back to us by people who are the contemporary missionaries who want to create a new colonialism and make us feel happy that they are taking care of the problems in our community because the solutions are local. We got this. We've always had this. We are the descendants of struggle. And what that means is that we are the ones people who went through, who came here in bondage, folks whose land was taken, imagined. They imagined us before we even existed. They went through things that we can only imagine. The kind of pain and the kind of endurance, that kind of memory that just exists in ourselves, right? Because we remember, our bodies remember. And the fact that our bodies remember is not only one of the reasons why we have the highest asthma rates, the highest tension rates, we have all of those health disparities that come from all of the environmental burdens that get put in our communities. That is intentional, right? And so now we are in this moment where the children of extraction, those folks whose land and whose property was taken from, their freedom, right, their labor was taken from, the folks who are not the ones responsible for creating climate change, the people who live in their carbon footprint, because there's nothing more sustainable, right, than being somebody who comes from struggle because we reuse, we repurpose, we recycle, because need makes you sustainable. Those of us who are not responsible for creating this mess, this crisis that is going to take us out with it, now have to be the front line of defense, the front line of resistance, and we cannot step back. We need to step up. We need to step up in a way that's united. So what's been happening since January? Since January, Trump has been doing the organizing for us, right? He's basically, our base has increased, volunteers have increased, resistance has increased. He's actually, there's a saying in Spanish, que de cada mal nace un bien. Out of everything bad, something good comes out of it, right? And so what's coming out of this is resistance. So they are literally eviscerating every program that came out of the civil rights movement, every program and every amenity and every opportunity that came out of the environmental justice movement. They're basically saying that it's okay to have lead in our communities, that it's okay to have pesticides. They're actually okay with killing our children. And I never thought I'd be at that moment in my life when I actually was going to say something that sounded so crazy, like they want us dead. But I believe that. I believe that they would like to eliminate us. And so what would our ancestors do? And so when we march and when we meet other folks who want to take your narrative, they want to take your story, they want to take it, market it, sell it to a funder, get some funding and drop it to our community and speak for our people, what do? We have to be united and we have to resist. I am from Brooklyn with the Uprose, the oldest Latino community-based organization. Related to the Climate Justice Alliance. And so tonight is the night that is going to spark our imagination, where we're not only going to imagine what kinds of world we want, but what kind of just relationships we want to build with each other. We're going to group, because people like to think, they like to talk about environmental justice and about climate change without talking about how relationships themselves are extracted, how people themselves are extracted. All those people who show up and they want to pick your brain, or those students who want to come and shadow you so they can study you like they deserve. We know that there is something valuable, something about us, something about the fact that our people have always honored Mother Earth, know how to work the land, know how to recycle things. We have knowledge that we have neglected because becoming American meant becoming addicted to consumption. And for people who never had anything, it meant that narcotized us. Buying things, buying shoes, buying things made us feel good because we feel so bad because we live at the intersection of all of the isms and climate change. Because we don't have a choice to pick between going to a rally on police brutality and one on climate change. We have to cover all of it, right? So today we're going to talk and live and build around that intersectionality because our communities live there, work there, build there, and we are going to resist there. And that is what you're going to be doing today. So gracias for coming. I'm going to be your MC. I talk a lot, so they can pull the mic on me, right? But for me, it is such a deep honor to be in this space. I was in a different kind of space this morning. I wasn't feeling it. I was trying to feel it. But my spirit was telling me, you got people, you got it. Your spirit is working, right? So please, the down, the defenses are down, and you're up. And my mom, if you ask her mom, how are you doing? She says, all the way up. And that's what we are. We're all the way up. Thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, friends and enemies, I say that not only because it was iconic words from the iconic leader Malcolm X, but I also say it because we are NPC, which means it's very apropos. So, I would like everyone to take out your NSA monitoring device, otherwise known as your cell phone. Pick out your social media surveillance application of your preference. Find We Act Radio and do. Thank you. Do something. Do something. Because this is where we are, people. This is the decolonization of America is what we're dealing with. We're dismantling white supremacy brick by brick in America. Are you up for the task? What will you tell the children? You was busy? The show was on? It is very serious right now. We did a show on We Act Radio just yesterday in promotion of this event, and the question was asked, they always say, do you think it's a conspiracy? You know, people are conspiring to do this, they're conspiring to get rid of you, like really? I'm like, yes, it's called the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, I mean, go on and on. There are think tanks designed exactly for what we're seeing happen. What we see happening is a plan that's been executed, was made years ago. Okay? Where is the People's Think Tank? This is solutions by the people for the people. This is our think tank tonight. This moment in history, we need to be bold. Bold. What would you do if you weren't so afraid? What would you do if you weren't so afraid? I introduce myself to you as an angry black man in therapy. It is not a joke, it's not a moniker. It is a testimony to the fact I have made a choice. I run a progressive independent radio station in the heart of Babylon, right down the street from Homeland Security Office, Department of Defense and Intelligence, and what have you. I can either be intimidated, depressed, or angry. Now, only one of those three emotions can be productive. Because as Malcolm said, don't be sad, get mad. Because when you're mad, you do something. You what? Do something. All right. And we're going to the next thing. And go back in therapy. We're going back in. Okay. But tonight we're going to hear from folks on key questions about expanding sanctuary, sovereignty, and local DC organizers to help spark our imaginations. Now, I love quotes. I suggest you collect quotes because we're going to need encouragement. And quotes can really inspire you when you need them the most. One of my favorite quotes is, imagination is more important than knowledge. I said it one time in a room full of Stanford and Harvard and, you know, those people. And they said, well, who said that? I said, Albert Einstein. Okay? Imagination is more important than knowledge. Let's not be intimidated by the system that we're up against. Because the one thing they cannot control is our imaginations. That is why art is the first thing to get cut and the last thing to get funded. They do not want to support your creativity. They want to mute that as much as possible. That's why it's cookie cutter society all around this country. Focus on your creativity. Be imaginative. And don't be afraid to dream big. All right? Now, we've had a meeting and we was talking about where did the term sanctuary cities come from? I was skeptical because the first time I heard it was from my mayor's mouth. And then one of my comrades, she said, you too? The first time she heard it was from her mayor's mouth. So whenever you hear someone repeating the same phrase, that means there was some discussion around it. So we're going to expand sanctuary cities. What is it? And why it doesn't include people that, since the dawn of time in this country, been here, because Native Americans haven't been looking for sanctuary cities. Black people show up and looking for sanctuary cities. So what does that really mean? We need to expand that. So come to the stage, there's three wonderful people who are going to help us do that. Cindy Wiseman, Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, Michael Leon, and that means Warrior, my brother. Maggie Martin, our veterans against the war. I want everybody to say, war is terrorism. War is terrorism. War is terrorism. All right.
Grassroots freedom fighters, right? Because that's what we are. Are we? Grassroots freedom fighters, right? So part of this moment is, you know, we're getting an assault on us every single day. Right? To a new level. Our communities have been in resistance, our communities have been fighting back, but the volume has been turned up, and our communities they're coming after all of us, right? And part of what I think we've been trying to figure out is what are some strategies for us in this moment that actually going to take us to through that journey, to that path to victory. And it may be a long time. It may be a long time, so I want us to get settled in that. It's not going to happen overnight. And even if we're able to impeach Trump, we need to know that that's going to have a long-term impact, decades to undo all the damage that he's been doing to our peoples in these 98 days, right? In these 99 days, today's the 99th day, right, of that damage and destruction to both peoples and the planet. So part of what we need at this moment, more than anything, is movement alignment. Movement alignment with people who want to get down with us, right? People who are going to follow our leadership. People who are going to basically say that they want to support our issue and that they're going to be true allies in the struggle, right? So I think that's one thing that's really important. How do we align in this political moment with people who are going to support us? Because there's way more people in this country. I just want to underscore this. 80% of this people in this country do not support Trump regime and do not support what's happening. Do you all feel me? 80% of the people. Because if you count all the folks that can't vote, young people, formerly incarcerated people, undocumented people, residents, and people who just feel so disenfranchised that they don't feel that, if we actually take that number, we're the majority, right? And I think that that's what we have to remember, is that we are the majority of people in this country, and we're gonna fight to win, but that's gonna be, we gotta align people, and that's gonna be really important. The second thing is that we need to have visionary opposition. So it's not just about the resistance, it's about actually saying what we want. So we gotta be in permanent struggle, but we gotta actually also say all the work that we've been doing in our communities. Just Transition, Rebel Cities, Movement for Black Lives Policy Platform, Invest, Divest, Grassroots Feminism. All the work that we've been doing for decades and years, now is the opportunity to lift those up as an alternative. Because more than ever, that's who we have to win. Brother talked about how do we get people, the radical imagination of people at this moment is to present those alternatives. Because not only are we need to fight and defend, but we need to be able to say, these are the things that is gonna like solve the economic crisis that's going to solve the ecological crisis, and that's going to solve the crisis of democracy. And that's what's really important. And the third thing is that we have to set the building blocks for the long term, right? We've got to think about this as a protracted struggle, and we got to dare to hope. We can't let that hope be taken away from us. No matter how bad things are going to get, they're going to get worse. And we can't let that, because they can't rob us of that. Our heart, our resilience, our spirit. So we, as It Takes Roots, came together to align strategically. So Grassroots Global Justice, Climate Justice Alliance, Indigenous Environmental Network, and Right to the City. And we came together strategically to align so that we can actually have that collective power, aggregate our power, right? And part of that is to really center people of color, working class, gender nonconforming, women's leadership, front and center. And we're not apologetic about that. We think that that is really key and important. But we also think that grassroots organizing is the solution, right? That's the solution. None of these, legal solutions are important, but that's not going to get us liberation, right? It's going to be people power on the ground, what's going to actually set us free. And so I think that that's one thing that's important. So that's an example of alignment. The other thing is that there's a new coalition that's been called by Movement for Black Lives called Beyond the Moment. And Beyond the Moment is a coalition that's led by Black folks, and they are invited other people of color-led organizations and movements to come together to call ourselves the majority. Because we gotta be able to say that, we're the majority. And we started with political education on April 4th, which was the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's visionary speech called Beyond Vietnam. And what he was talking about there were the three giants, the three evils, right? Militarism, capitalism, and racism. And we think that it's important, 50 years later, to this day, we're still dealing with militarism in our communities and abroad. We're about to go to war, y'all. They're moving. Syria, Afghanistan, North Korea, serious. In our communities, the border, in our inner cities, in our rural communities, they're doing war here and war abroad, right? And so it's important for us to think about how do we then come together in this moment and call out militarism, capitalism, right? We know so much of the economic situation and the ecological situation that we're in is because of this dig, burn, dump, extractive system, right? And that we know that we have to have an alternative to that, that's based on local, living, regenerative economies that actually give life and not take that away, right? And then the third piece is really about talking about racism, and in particular, anti-Black sentiment that exists in society, and it exists in our movements, and it exists within our own peoples. And that's why we are aligning ourselves to talk about what does it mean to be in solidarity with an effort that's led by a Movement for Black Lives. And so the Beyond the Moment is also saying we as Black folks need to be in solidarity with Arab folks, with Latinos, Latinas, with Asian folks, with immigrants, undocumented people. And so we've made a call to mobilize on May 1st. And that we're saying to people, how do we take on these three evils, the three giants, and really talk about a brown and Black solidarity that is going to begin to talk about expanded sanctuary. So I'm going to close out now because I keep getting a little sign. But expanded sanctuary is really about how do we create safety and security for our transgender brothers and sisters? How do we create safety and security for Muslim and Arab brothers and sisters? How do we create that for white working class people that stand up to racism? How do we create that for our undocumented brothers and sisters? How do we create that for our elders, our children? That's what we begin to do. We're liberating territories through an expanded sanctuary so that we know it's not just a city council vote that creates sanctuary for people. It's not just a church, but that everywhere becomes liberated territory for us to be who we authentically are. And that is the challenge before us. Like, how are we going to defend and fight each other, stand with each other, and know that we're all coming from different struggles, but that at the end of the day, when we come together, right? When you go like this, we're all different, and we come together, it's a mighty fist of power. So that is the challenge. So we're here mobilizing for the People's Climate March, but we're also mobilizing on Monday, which is May Day. And we're reclaiming May Day, going on strike, shutting S down. You know, there's kids in the room. And basically beginning to keep growing this movement, right? This movement of movements that is going to take back our power. So thank you.
We take roots. Always an honor and pleasure to be on stage with my sister Cindy, can give us the big picture analysis like few people in this world can. So it's always an honor to be working with her again. My name is Michael Leon Guerrero. It does mean warrior, lion warrior to be exact. A lot to live up to. I'm the executive director now of the Labor Network for Sustainability. Labor Network for Sustainability was founded by leaders within the labor movement that basically saw the writing on the wall around climate change and felt that the labor movement needed to lead our way out of this transition to help preserve and save the planet and life as we know it on the planet. And so we're a grassroots network within the labor movement that helps to advance that and also encourages our brothers and sisters in other sectors and movements to work with the labor movement on coming up with solutions that are community and worker-led. So that's who we are. Among the many assaults that Cindy had talked about, one of the things that's been in the news lately that's been on my mind has been NAFTA. And Trump has been talking about, was one of his promises he was going to renegotiate NAFTA. And look, surprisingly enough, I'm not seeing enough on the left around what's our response, to that whole idea. And I think our response should be, hell yes, we want to renegotiate NAFTA. Hell yes, we want to keep these corporations from running rampant all over the country, all over the world, deregulating, forcing our communities to compete with each other. These side agreements, for those of you that remember, that were made for the passage of NAFTA to protect the environment and protect workers who are going to be displaced, they weren't worth the paper they were written on. And we're seeing the consequences of that today. Why am I bringing it up? Is because Trump won over many of the people who lost those jobs in the Midwest that moved to the border region. And then he made it a whole racist narrative about now we have to build a wall because the Mexican hordes are coming across the border. What he doesn't say is that everybody lost. Indigenous people throughout the continent, throughout the Americas have seen assaults on their sovereignty land in unprecedented ways that we haven't seen in decades. The Mexican people, 6 million people were displaced because of NAFTA off the countryside who were supposed to go work in those factories on the border, and those factories picked up and moved to China. So where are they supposed to go? The Zapatistas took up arms after NAFTA was passed because they saw the writing on the wall and what was coming. Right? So hell yes, we want to renegotiate NAFTA. Hell yes, we need to actually, we need to fight back against trade agreements like that, and we need to set the agenda. So I want to just first say that our brothers and sisters in Mexico, they're actually starting to plan a meeting on May 26th in Mexico City to start pulling together social movements to figure out a response to that. Why else am I bringing it up? Is because the tradition of It Takes Roots comes out of this fight. And I know our struggles go way back to colonization, the fight against slavery in the Americas. But 40 years ago, when these neoliberal policies came in this new wave of assault under the Reagan administration and Thatcher, the whole deregulation of capital and industries, that led to the movement that we are a part of today. It was grassroots struggles throughout the Americas that picked up that fight and actually won major battles against free trade agreements in the Americas. And it was social movements that took up that cause and that fight. And it was workers, it was communities, indigenous communities, everyone together in that fight. So I raised it because we need to revive that same struggle. And It Takes Roots is part of that proud tradition. And it's great to see a lot of the new generation now that's starting to take up this struggle And glad to be a part of that. And all the veterans I know that have been part of these struggles that are also here in this room that we can all learn from in terms of that. We need to revive the tradition of like the Just Transition Alliance and how workers and communities, frontline workers and communities work together. Jose Bravo, Pam Talmi were part of those struggles, where it was an actual partnership where they were fighting for that agenda, where they knew we had to transition out of these dirty industries. And they took up the struggle to actually make that transition happen in a just way. And it needs to happen in a just way. And I need to say this on behalf of those workers who, I know there's a lot of struggle, there's division within the labor movement. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of distrust about the concept even of just transition. Because they haven't seen a good just transition happen yet. A lot of workers got left behind. And NAFTA is one of many examples of how they got left behind. So unless it's an agenda that's by, of, and for working people and communities, we're never going to see the kind of transition that we need. We have to make it happen. So I'm going to end, I know my time is up. This is a contribution that we're making to this conversation, and it is a conversation. And we have to be rigorous, we have to be deliberate, and we have to struggle. But this is a working paper we're putting out. It's called The Worker Alternative to the Trump Agenda. And basically, it's 4 main points. One is that we have to create good jobs. 2 is that we have to protect threatened workers and communities that are going to lose work through the transition. 3 is that we have to remedy inequality and injustice in that, so communities that haven't had access to good jobs can get them. And 4 is that we have to evolve to a new economy. Right? The table's wide open now. Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump help open the conversation. We can talk about socialism, democratic socialism, fascism. It's all on the table now, and that's why we do have to be bold. We have to be visionary. We have to be militant, because we sure as hell can expect that they're going to be militant on us. So that's our message, folks. We have to figure out how we're going to bridge these divides. We've got to figure out what is the unity that we can build around. Because if we don't do that, we're all going down. They're coming after all of us eventually. So again, it's just a real honor to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to continue to fight with you all in this struggle. Thank you.
Well, thank you to my fellow panelists and the event organizers. I'm with Iraq Veterans Against the War. We're veterans who were in the U.S. military since September 11th. You know, folks might wonder why you want to work with veterans who were the upholders of U.S. empire, U.S. capitalism abroad, and I hear that, and I'd love to have a conversation with folks. But one thing I want to share is that our community of veterans is an example that a full transformation is possible, and that we can meet folks there. And I think we also share a connection and a bond because we really understand the depth of the deception that we fell for, and we feel that same sense of betrayal. And so just thank you to Grassroots Global Justice Alliance for embracing us as an organization, as a community, and understanding where we're coming from and helping us struggle through that. Some of the things that I wanted to share was just how militarism is really affecting all of us, whether we realize it or not. We have militarism abroad in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Yemen. We have heightened military aggression happening right now in Syria. We've dropped the mother of all bombs recently in Afghanistan, and we have all this heightened tension happening with North Korea right now, as well as Russia and Iran. So things are looking really bleak internationally. At home, we have militarization on the border. We have militarization in our schools, in policing. Even Child Protective Services, we heard in Colorado, has been given military-grade equipment through the 1038 program. Sorry, I'm blanking right now. But it's really spreading all across the world and heightening. And so I just want to encourage folks that as we all need to look at our work through racial justice lens, like we all need to care about environmental justice, we all need to also care about militarism, because not only is it doing direct harm in all those places, but it's also robbing all of our communities of the resources that we need to thrive and to be healthy. So it's something that I hope that we can join together and chip away at. Recently, Donald Trump proposed a budget that proposes a $54 billion increase to the military budget. The military budget is already over 60% of discretionary spending. Military contractors like Halliburton and Lockheed Martin make upwards of 90% of their profits from federal contracts. So that's money directly from us, from our communities, into the military-industrial complex for war profiteers. And they're profiteering off war abroad and the militarization here at home. And that's, connected to the prison industrial complex. It's connected very deeply to policing. And, across the board, I think one of the things that we need to stand together, or unite together, and really address. So I guess the last thing I want to say in closing is just a request that in addition to looking at things through an anti-militarist lens, that we also start to think differently and challenge ourselves to think differently about safety and security and defense. And just like we need to do that at home and find alternatives to calling the police, find ways to solve issues within communities, we also need to be thinking like that globally, and thinking about diplomacy, thinking about ways that we can really support folks who are impacted by wars, like opening our borders to refugees and not banning folks in this struggle and what we're going to do over the next few days and beyond. So thanks so much. Appreciate it.
One of the things what people's sovereignty could look like in your community is called community land trust. Everybody say community land trust. Community land trust. We cannot dismantle the master's house with his own tools. We got to do this again with our imagination and creativity. All right, I want everybody to subscribe to Edgar's YouTube channel and watch what we've been doing with Community Land Trust and put it in here so you can follow the blueprint. It's been successful examples of this in Roxbury, Boston, South Bend, Boston, and other areas around the country. We don't share our success stories. We need communication. It's imperative that we foster our own lines of communication. We cannot be dependent upon the 6 corporations that control most of what we see here and read and think that we are informed. If you watch the news, you are misinformed. If you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. Big difference. Trust who you're listening to and you're taking to the stage. And I want to make sure that I know some topics real quick as they come to the stage. I learned a lot working with these people already. And we have to do that to learn from each other. These are the PEMES principles. The next principle of democratic organizing. If you got a pen and paper, as well as you should, write these down. Number 1, repeat after me, be inclusive. Be inclusive. Number 2, emphasis on bottom-up organizing. Emphasis on bottom-up organizing. Number 3, let people speak for themselves. Let people speak for themselves. Number 4, work together in solidarity and mutuality. Work together in solidarity and mutuality. Number 5, build just relationships among ourselves. Build just relationships among ourselves. And number 6, a commitment to self-transformation. A commitment to self-transformation. Are we ready? I just want to say that be inclusive, you should pretty much know what that means. Emphasis on bottom-up organizing means that we shouldn't have to have some sort of Tide Foundation grant. Can you imagine the Black Panther Party saying, can we get a grant to stop the racist police from our communities? In fact, I would submit to you that the nonprofit industrial complex was implemented in the 60s just to create a climate of conflict and competition rather than collaboration and collective action. Because then we start fighting over resources and just trying to make ourselves more susceptible to be approved for it. Don't say Palestine. Don't say Palestine. Understand the game. You will not get funded, but I will work with you. Let people speak for themselves, because no one is more qualified to tell your story than you. Okay? We don't need more doctorate degrees. We need people that vote with their dollars. Pray with their feet. Say vote with your dollars. Pray with your feet. Man, you can't be saying you don't like Trump and then you walk in here and drinking England beer, wearing a Patriots football jersey, going to Home Depot. All right, here we go. Keep it moving.
We're going to ask you all to speak a little slower so that the translators can get everything on, all right? How's everybody feeling? You guys are tired, just ate, all full. Sorry, translator. That was in Hirata. I said, hello relatives, my name is Eagle Woman. My English name is Candy Masa and I'm from North Dakota. So I just came here from New York City. I was in there in the UN and I went in there and they called the name of my organization, which is the Indigenous Environmental Network. And I was looking around and I was like, who's supposed to be doing this intervention? Like, we don't know it's the UN, but we know what the hell's going on. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I jumped up to the mic and I told them, I said, the United States has participated in human rights violations in every single article in the Declaration, especially at Standing Rock. Yeah. And I told them, I had that whole auditorium. At the end, they were saying, Minnie Wachoni! And I told them that it's really important that we have our sovereignty. And it's not just, oh, you're sovereign when we want you to be, and you're not when we need to take shit away from you, stuff. Sorry. But there's like 3 forms of sovereignty that you have to be aware of, because in our communities, there's that tribal government sovereignty. But then there's also community sovereignty. And then there's even individual sovereignty. And that's where it gets a little complex, because we don't necessarily always agree with some of those tribal leaders. But the reason, if you can imagine, is because of what happened. Like in elementary school, I heard, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, and I was like, excuse me, where are we? Oh, that's not English chapter. You know, and so I was like, this is crazy. This is crazy. I don't understand what you're talking about. How come you don't tell me? I grew up on a reservation, and they wouldn't teach me anything about my own culture there. I had to learn it for myself. That's individual sovereignty. And then I started growing a garden, because who the heck can say you're sovereign if you don't even know how to feed yourself? Yeah, right? And you can do it in a city. You can have a pot. You know, put some tomatoes or, I don't know, basil, some mint. You know, just try something. Like the first time I gardened, I killed everything. I just died. And now it doesn't anymore. So just try it, you know? And then that community sovereignty is just making sure that we're listening to each other. Like, what do you want to do in your community? Well, how do you see this making sense for you? What about you over there? What's right for you? That collective thing that we've kind of lost. And then that larger sovereignty, that piece is, listen to us! Listen to the voices of the people. We know best. Somebody just said it. We speak for ourselves. And so that's what I would participate in. As I'm getting all these things here. And I just want to end this with saying, I really appreciate all of you. I really appreciate this thing right here. Because this didn't exist like 5 years ago. We wouldn't be sitting in a room together. And we are on the right track. We are doing it, and we should be so proud of ourselves. So Matagirat, everybody, thank you.
Peace, everybody. I want to thank Angela and everybody else who allowed me to be here. Usually, typically, when they have national organizations and movements that come to Washington, they don't include people from DC. And there's a difference between DC and Washington. And so I'm I'm representing DC. This side of town is forgotten. The entire city, southeast, northwest, southwest, northeast. But the people who are really forgotten, the people who are getting pushed out of the city, people who police are killing, the people who are building soccer stadiums over top of the neighborhoods. The music is getting pushed out, so that's what I'm representing. My name is Xavier Brown. I'm part of the Black Farmers Collective called the Black Dairy Farm Collective. Also, I'm with an organization in DC called Soul for City Movement for Sovereignty, agroecology work in DC. And so we utilize agroecology, the natural farming practices, and the political organizing tools as tools to organize our communities. We do it on the ground with people coming home from prison, with people who have addiction issues, like people who are pretty much have been forgotten by mainstream society. That's who we work with, and that's our base. And we've been able to kind of build a real solid movement in the city, going from neighborhood to neighborhood, trying to connect neighborhoods who had community violence at one time, and then had what we call city beefs, who went back and forth, shooting each other. But now we have gardens, we have farmers markets, we have community exchanges, we have farm stands, we have entrepreneurs, we have compost programs that are being run by returning citizens. And so, that's what we're working towards in DC. The Black Dairy Farm Collective, we've created a social methodology called, organizing methodology called Afroecology. And it's basically people of African descent, our interpretation of agroecology, reconnecting us back to the land, back to our ancestors, back to spirit, back to each other. And so last year we hosted several Afroecology gatherings and trainings in different communities across the city. We hosted a larger agroecology encounter in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and that's why I saw my hair Tuckey's ancestral ground, so I wore her shirt to represent that. And so we're going to have another one this year to continue building the movement, and I want to continue just to connect with people, connect with what we're doing with Soulful, to these other beautiful movements, to what she was talking about, MST, and the other folks that are in the crowd. And just really hold it down for DC, because DC's forgotten about it. It's a lot of us here, but we need a voice, and we need people to really represent for the city. So.
Good evening, folks. My name is Jade. I'm from Brazil, so I'm going to first of all apologize for my poor English. So I'm going to speak a little bit slower than my colleagues here. And, well, first of all, to present my organization, the organization where I come from. This is our flyer that's a symbol of the center. And we shall live as a gift for the Mauritius and to remind you guys that we were here once. We expect that this is the first of a lot of other times. Presenting the MST because we're not so sure that the information, as our MC has said, sometimes to watch the news is very misinforming. So I'm going to read, so I won't feel so nervous about it. The Brazilian Landless Rural Workers Movement, known as MST, is a Brazilian social movement fighting for land, agrarian reform, and social change. It is the result of a long history of land concentration and social inequality, and is inspired by various forms of resistance and popular struggles for social justice and the sovereignty of peoples. For 33 years now, the MST has organized the landless peasants throughout Brazil to fight for their land and produce healthy food, building a better life for their families with education, health, and culture based on cooperation and respect for each other and for nature. The MST is part of La Via Campesina, an international coalition of more than 170 peasant movements from 80 countries worldwide, including the United States. So I was asked to, from the internationalist point of view, to comment about this question about the people's sovereignty. And for us, the popular sovereignty is directly in relation to the food sovereignty, which was a concept formulated by the Via Campesina Worldwide Congress in 1996, meaning that the people, to be protagonists of its own destiny, should have conditions to produce their own food, right? Proper food, healthy food, the necessarily cultural and in good quantity for the people who live in this determined territory. Hunger and malnutrition that still exist and still affect millions of human beings have always been, through the history of humanity, the worst problem of the organization of human societies. But since the beginning of the 20th century, people of the world got to a level of complexity of organization and of knowledge, scientific and technological knowledge, that there shouldn't be no explanation that justifies the existence of hunger. That's why we believe there is no way to split the people's sovereignty from the food sovereignty, because the right to eat is a sacred right of all human beings, independently of their social condition, of their skin color, of their ethnicity, their religious beliefs, their gender or their age. But it's been continuously disrespected since the production and the commercialization of all the food products have been manipulated and controlled by the international capital companies, especially the international capital American companies. So this threatening of international capital over the rural world in the third or undeveloped world under the mode of the agribusiness has consequences very destructive from the point of view of the submission of the populations that get dependent on the model of production based on the technologies that are owned by those companies, and also for the health, destructive for the health of entire populations, because this other model of eating or the food producing affects the health and disrespects the cultural aspects of whole populations of entire countries, for example. And it also affects our health. I'm sorry for using our, but it's true. It always affects our health with the use of poison, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides, and modified organisms that are forbidden in the States and in the most developed countries in Europe, and they're permitted and used to produce food for the developed world. So I tend to believe, as the other comrade said before, maybe we should probably do something to just eliminate us, other than poisoning our harvest. So, and worse than that, then affecting our cultural habits and our beliefs and our capacity of producing our own food, That model of the agribusiness destroys the environment, transforming big extensions of land in real deserts, poisoning our rivers and entire aquifers, and extinguishing our biodiversity. As we can see, to establish the popular sovereignty, which for us depends on food sovereignty, is fundamental to discuss with all the society the future of our new generations and redefine who will control the territories, the natural resources, according to the interests of the people and not to the interests of Chicago Commodity Stock Exchange. This is certainly not an easy task, but no changes come without struggle. Last week, we suffered another massacre, and 9 of our comrades were murdered because, as all of you should know by now, there's a coup d'etat being established the day after day in Brazil since a year ago. And one of the consequences is the political persecution of all the activists of social and political organizations. And so, the day before yesterday, when I was preparing to this trip, another comrade was murdered, going back to his settlement in another state. And see, I'm coming here not as an individual, but as representing a nationwide movement which organizes 350,000 families in settlements in Brazil, in 23 states of the Federation, aside from the Federal District. And still, our militants are being murdered. We're in 2017. And no one says anything, and nothing happens to them. So, I'm not going to cry for that, because for our dead comrades, we shouldn't have 1 minute of silence, but a whole life of resistance. So, that's why our humble contribution for this conversation here today is to say that we're trying to do our part of this struggle, right? The MST and the other organizations, the peasant organizations of Latin America, we have been organizing people to build from the grassroots a resistance that brings agroecology as an alternative project of culture and life, so that we cultivate the land and the land cultivates us back. That's it.
The local DC panel.
Hi friends, how you doing? Everywhere I go, especially in national places, I love to ask this question. How many of you have ever been to DC before? Cool. That's beautiful. Thanks for coming back. How many of you have lived in DC or know someone who lives in DC? That's beautiful. Well, thanks for being here, all those great things. Now, how many of you are originally from Washington, D.C.?
And of you that are originally from Washington, D.C., how many of you reside east of the Anacostia River? See how the hands drop down? Just drop like flies. Did you see that? So I often say that it's very difficult for me to speak to a room when the room doesn't know how to talk to me. We have these conversations about sovereignty, we have these conversations about solidarity, but all my life somebody has come here to organize for me and never asked me how to organize with me. And then when you all come and visit, these are the first organizations they're telling you come organize with. But nobody from here is down. Nobody from here is involved. When you speak to the majority of the people about the problems, these are the predators that are preying on us. And this is who y'all want to march with. So, as an 8th generation native Washingtonian, again I say, I've seen so many people claiming to organize for me that never took the time to organize with me. And after years of consulting and interning and organizing, I realized what I needed to do was create a future worth fighting for. And so as the executive director of the Future Foundation, I was able to do just that. Funny story that we're having this conversation because Kimon was one of the inspirers for the People's Budget. I was one of 2 organizers who were successful in raising taxes for millionaires in Washington, D.C. But before we did that, if you made $40,000 or $1,040,000, you were taxed at the same bracket. That didn't make any sense to me. But as I was continuing to organize, trying to get what was named the Millionaire's Tax raised and increased for fiscal year 2012, I started to realize that these budget priorities that we were setting and these things that we were saying wasn't what the people in Anacostia were saying to me. It wasn't the lived experience of the folks in Ward 7. It wasn't the lived experience of the folks who walk up and down MLK in front of WEAC Radio. And so I had to spend a moment really reconciling what I was organizing and contributing to and what the issues were. So at that time came the People's Platform, where I thought, let's give some citizens an opportunity to speak about what it is they feel as everybody's running for everything all the time. Whatever that platform is, make it your own. That evolved. It got excitement. Eventually became co-opted. But I am the goose, not the egg. Thus, the People's Budget came on. If the only time I'm human is when you can put a dollar amount to me, then let me speak your language. And let me bring some of the folks along who through my whole 15 years of training and organizing and directing came and said, hey, this don't look too right. Hey, if we know that this is how much we need, not just to survive but thrive, why are we asking for pennies on the dollar? What is this hat in hand? We want to go and keep continuing to beg for the crumbs on the floor, not even the meat and the bread that's on the table. Why am I leaving my people in this ass backwards? Excuse me, but if your parents are still letting you be here, they clearly want you to hear the real. I'm just saying, plenty of kids on the playground, I'm just putting it out there. Then clearly, how do we do this differently? That's the People's Budget was formed. Let's have a conversation with the people. Let's let them know what a line item looks like in their everyday life. Not in your everyday advocacy life that you're getting a cute check for, or a great resume builder, but in the everyday of somebody whose electricity ain't on right now. I've lived in Flint my whole life and didn't have a name for it. Didn't know that there were individuals that could have some say in what it looked like to clean my water. Didn't know people would protest or send me bottled water if we had organized. So all we're doing is saying to the people, this is your money. Whether you get TANF, whether you get SNAP, whether you're a trust fund baby, what do your values look like when you're put into the budget? And so there's been some interest around it. There are some folks who see that it makes a very good grant that you can write. But again, it's not the grant writer's budget. It's not your favorite nonprofit's budget. Participatory budgeting has been going on all over the world for a very long time. And I am urging organizers who are tired of sitting down in the middle of the street behind causes and being the first to get locked up and the last to be bailed out, to have some real conversations about what it looks like for us to win. And I'm not saying that this is what winning looks like for everyone. because some of the people I organize with can't count. So how accessible is a budget when we talk about folks who ain't literate? Investigate who y'all are supporting. Investigate the people behind your mission. Don't do what we're doing. Tell us what we need to be doing. Speak to me about what it looks like for the transplants from your part of town to understand how they can take this back to your town. Because see, a lot of people are leaving DC now that the audacity of hope ain't here no more. So if you ain't for me, you are against me. And I don't care what you stand for. And I want to be very clear. My people don't always look like me. My people don't always love like me. But they know to use gender pronouns in a progressive space. They know not to assume race. They know how to be respectful. They know how to ask questions and listen equally. And that's what the people's budget is about. Whether you got $1 or $1 million, what does it look like to put your money where your mouth is? And what does it look like to stop supporting the folks who are not organizing with us, but are praying for us? The time to play nice is done. You're not for us, you're against us. And that's what the people's budget is about.
What up? How y'all doing? Good, good. Is anybody tired yet? No, nobody's tired yet. Oh, no, sure ain't. And I think that's a good point to make. For one thing, a lot, especially with our good friend Ben Carson. That's my buddy. When we talk about Black people, African Americans specifically, and we talk about, they asked me to talk about environmental justice and gentrification, right? And we talk about us as African Americans. We are not immigrants in the sense that we did not, most of us did not come over here on a cruise ship and say we willingly want to come here. Most of us didn't ask to come here. But ever since we've been here, we've been moving. Ever since we've been here, whether it's from plantation to plantation, from the south to the north, from the north to the Midwest, from the Midwest right on back to Africa, we are migrants in the most defined term. So one of the main things that makes us move more than anything else, especially right now, is the environment that we live in. And not in the sense of whether we have trees and green space, but who wants our environment now? Who has decided that because they've cleaned it up, we should give it up? And that happens every single place where you see Black folk, especially here in Washington, D.C. When I think about the community that I work with here in Washington, D.C., it is in Southwest D.C. And it is, in many ways, ground zero of displacement in the history of it for Washington, D.C. Whether we talk about urban renewal from the 50s and 60s to now, where you have baseball stadiums and future soccer stadiums that are anchors of displacement for community. So how do we fight back on that? That's a good question. Like, I'm literally asking y'all, as people across the country who are facing the same thing, whether you're in New York, whether you're in Atlanta, whether you're in Chicago, whether you're in my hometown of Denver, how are you fighting back against the gentry?
In DC, I know Kamal mentioned that around community land trust. We talk about saving public housing, and that's important because DC has a housing crisis. Affordable housing crisis, that is. We got lots of brand new condo buildings, lots of studio apartment and one-bedroom condos that are not marketed to anybody that looks like me or anybody that has an actual family of more than 2 children. But we don't have affordable low-income housing. And not just public housing, but private housing is an issue too for us here in Washington, D.C. So some of the ways that we all could be thinking about is how do we strategize beyond that? And that's an actual question. And I'm in a room full of solutionaries. I'm not going to sit up here and act like I have answers that I don't always have. And I'm not going to sit up here and tell y'all something about me that ain't really about me, you know? But I will say that we have to fight back. And we don't have to wait for a nonprofit to tell us to fight back. In whatever job that you're doing, whether you're driving an Uber, whether you're working at Big Lots, whether this is just a side thing and you had to beg to get these 3 days off to come up here. We appreciate y'all making your way up here. So I'm not gonna hold too tight, but just think about that in the sense of as migrants, as Black people, my family has been all around here to the west, some went back to Africa, and now I'm right back here where my grandparents grew up and where my mom was born. So let's think about that.
Hello everyone, my name is Jordan Marie Brings, the White Horses Daniel. I come from Koitasha Bayate, the Lower Sioux tribe in central South Dakota. I am the founder of Rising Hearts Coalition, which is a women Indigenous-led organizing group here in DC. That came from watching what I saw out in Standing Rock and watching our youth rise up and really be a strong, loud voice, as well as our women. So Rising Hearts really came from, you know, my favorite quote is, a nation isn't defeated until the hearts of its women are on the ground, and that's where the name came from. And every woman that I have in my life, I know are true warriors, and I will never let anything happen to their people without them like going down in flames or doing whatever. So that's where Rising Hearts came from. And my co-founder and best friend, Ariel Richard, she couldn't be here, but she's founded it with me. And during this movement of organizing here in DC to make sure we're representing the Indigenous voice, that's introduced me to local DC organizers, and who have become friends and are like family. And with that came DC Reinvest Coalition, where we saw a need for DC to reinvest in its community, reinvest in the people. And so part of that call was to get the city to divest from Wells Fargo. There was a national call, a divestment call from Standing Rock, getting cities, getting personal divestments to divest from these Dakota Access Pipeline funders. And so that started DC Reinvest Coalition. And can I get the DC Reinvest members to stand up, please? Everyone who's part of it, please stand up. But so we kicked off everything February 22nd with a bank action right next to the White House where we really made some noise. We had another bank action where we had a couple people come and personally divest from Wells Fargo. We had a resolution introduced on March 21st by Councilmember Grosso, who has been super supportive in our efforts. So we have a big focus on getting the city to divest from Wells Fargo because it's funding a dirty infrastructure project and violating Indigenous and human rights. But we also and part of the language that's in there, we also want to reinvest in the communities. And so we've been doing tons of outreach with local organizers and local organizations to make sure that we're hearing what's going on in the DC community so we can make sure that your issues are being heard and that they can be put into this resolution and have you represented as well because your members, your council members are supposed to represent you. So right now that resolution is tied up in the Finance and Revenue Committee with Jack Evans. So if you live in DC and you're in Ward 2 and you have Jack Evans, please reach out to him and email him and request that he schedule a hearing for us because that's what we're going to be doing. And next Thursday we're going to be packing the hearing room. So if you're here and you can attend, please join us. We have some people that are going to be testifying and really urging them to schedule a hearing for us to continue this movement and this campaign. And so, you know, Wells Fargo is committing these injustices on the other people, and you know they're funding private prisons, they're redlining, they have illegal fraud scandals happening, and so people's lives are being put at risk and for profit, and not really being thought of first. And so that's something that we really want to carry on out of this movement is making sure that people are put first because we're in a crucial time with this president. And this administration who are really putting corporate interests above human life. $1 over human life is basically what's happening and what we're seeing. And so we need to protect what's sacred, and what's sacred includes everybody, the environment, the people, that's you, everyone sitting here in this room. So we really urge you to join this campaign with us. If you can join as a coalition member, please help support us because, you know, this is a national call to divest, but we really want to represent you and we really want people to be put first. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. There are so many people to thank. We're not going to list them all, but all the volunteers, everyone who served food, all of you here, we are deeply, deeply grateful. All of this takes all kinds of people to put themselves together and to be willing to do the hard work, sometimes the work that nobody wants to do. So we're grateful for that. So at this moment, all of you have a little purple pledge card on your table. Can you just take that, please? And we're going to take this pledge together. It's going to be like a marriage. No, don't get scared. So we're going to say it together, right? In unison. Can we do this? Yeah. All right, because this is better than the Pledge of Allegiance. This is a pledge to our people, to our communities, to our histories, to our struggle. So this is the Take Roots pledge to grow resistance. ¿Están listos? All right, let's go. Everybody together? All right. I pledge to stand for the rights, actions, and leadership of communities who are at the front lines of fighting for water, land, and home, indigenous peoples, women, immigrants, and communities of color. I pledge to fight for our freedoms, side by side, in power and for our lives. I pledge to rise together, women, trans folks, men, all genders and sexualities. I pledge to confront racism and police violence, Black Lives Matter. I pledge to end the war at home and abroad. Our best security is our unity. I pledge to resist corporate rule and a world of injustice and greed. I pledge to speak truth to climate deniers, to defend Mother Earth, water is life. I pledge to grow the resistance. No more walls, no more hate, for a feminist world, for liberation and justice for all. Peace, people. See you on the streets, but first the red action tomorrow. I don't know if you want me to announce that. Yeah. So tomorrow, what is it, 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock.